Paul Atreides does not conquer his destiny, he becomes its instrument. The Fremen crown him not as savior but as an inevitability puppet in a script older than their thirst. Bene Gesserit schemes, spice-forged prophecies, desert dogma converge not to elevate humanity, but to grind it into the sand. What does a messiah owe his followers when their liberation is a cage? Paul's rise is no triumph. It is the cost of a myth that demands blood to sustain its hunger. Paul's rise is no accident, it is design. What if the chosen one is the system's pawn? His visions burn bright, yet each prophecy chains him tighter. The Bene Gesserit centuries unfold not in hope, but in inevitability. Spice does not elevate in tangles. Fremen who sing his name may yet turn to ash. A messiah born of manipulation cannot escape the hands that shaped him. Does salvation demand surrender? Paul's blade cleaves both tyrant and liberator. The Fremen's drought becomes his flood, their myth his ruin. Every victory carves his surrender. The desert whispers no triumphantly the cost of a legend that outlives its maker. What kind of God needs his people to believe him dead? The Imperium's foundation is the Buttlerean Jihad's scorched earth purge of thinking machines. 3 pillars remain: mentats, navigators, and the Bene Gesserit's century-spanning breeding program. Each enforces a fragile balance. The Spacing Guild holds the spice, both drug and celestial map dictating interstellar trade. Navigators burn it to fold space, their sanity fraying with every jump. Bene Gesserit sisters manipulate bloodlines, not to forge heroes, but a gestalt entity capable of reshaping reality. Paul Atreides is not an anomaly. He is the sum of this design: mentat calculus, guild logistics, and genetic engineering. The Fremen mythologize him, but their faith is the system's final feedback loop. A messiah emerges not from virtue, but from the Imperium's own gears grinding toward collapse. What does a machine build to escape its own logic? A cycle, a trap. A god who thrives only when his people need him most. The Bene Gesserit's breeding program was not a gamble, it was a scalpel. For 3 millennia they engineered a lineage, not a legend. Paul Atreides was no accident. He was a calculated variable. The Sisterhood's hands, gloved in patience, guided him into the void between myth and madness. His rise was not a miracle. It was a system solving its own equation. They planted the seed of messianic longing in the Fremen's dust. Let their thirst for salvation strangle their reason. Let the Imperium's arrogance blind it to the puppet strings. Paul's visions were not divine. They were the feedback of a machine chewing its own tail. The spice, the stillsuits, the desert's all cogs in a clockwork prophecy. The Fremen did not choose Paul, they needed him. And need is the closest thing to magic the Bene Gesserit recognize. Every whisper of Mahdi was a blade turning in the Sisterhood's design. They knew what his birth could unmake: empires, hierarchies, the tidy prisons of history, yet their triumph is a hollow one. Paul's path, genocidal, inevitable, proves their vision was a cage, not a liberation. They forged a god to break the empire's chains, only to find the god they made could not be unmade. The plan worked, it works still. The Sisterhood's legacy is not a savior, it is the proof that hope, weaponized, becomes a plague, and Paul, he was never the answer, he was the question. The scream in the algorithm, the price of a dream that outlived its architects. They didn't create gods, they cultivated ghosts. Missionaria Protectiva wove its seed religions not to save souls, but to trap them, each doctrine a snare, each prophecy a noose. The Fremen called Paul their savior, the Bene Gesserit called him a lever. Every whispered myth about the Listen Al-Gaib, every crucified messiah in the desert's memory, was a thread in a net meant to catch him. Faith was never a fire to be kindled, it was a mirror, polished to reflect only what they needed. What does a species do when it fears its own survival? It builds a martyr where it cannot build a future. The Bene Gesserit knew salvation was a disease, contagious and fatal. Paul's golden cord was not a destiny, it was a tether. They let the legends grow because they needed the storm, needed him to burn so they might harvest the ash. The Fremen danced their messianic dance, unaware they were treading a script written by eunuchs in ivory towers. A god is easy to control. A god is impossible to unmake. The missionaria's seed religions were not faiths, they were pressure valves. Paul's rise was not a miraclate, was a relief valve hissing open. The Bene Gesserit did not want a savior, They wanted a spark that would not outgrow the matchstick, but fire has a will of its own. And so the game, played in shadows, birthed a storm no algorithm could predict. The Bene Gesserit ensured the question would have no answer, only more questions, more blood. More faith, more fragile than the sand it walked on. The Bene Gesserit's benevolence is a lie etched in blood. Their breeding program was not charity but engineering, a machine to sculpt a weapon. Paul is no hero is the proof of their design, a boy turned into a god, then a monster. Every Fremen chant, every spice-fueled vision collapses under the weight of what it demands. The Bene Gesserit ensured the question would have no answer, only more questions, more blood. More faith, more fragile than the sand it walked on. What did they think they were building? A savior, a shepherd. Herbert's blade carves truth into myth. Paul's ascension is a rotting crown. His visions are not gifts but traps. The spice does not elevate and enslaves. The Fremen do not liberate, they consume. Their reverent mothers taste the future in screams. Bene Gesserit benevolence is a puppeteer's smirk. They craved control, not salvation. The hero's journey crumbles here. Dune's spine is a monument to hubris. Paul's birth was not destiny but calculation. His death, a warning. Messiahs do not Sabbathly devour. The sandworms of faith burrow through every page. What blooms in their wake is not hope, not triumph, only the hollow echo of a question asked too late. Who is the true monster? The man who kneels, the woman who plans, the child who dreams. Dune's answer is final, no savior. Only the cost of believing in them. The Orange Catholic Bible's command hangs a relic of warnings unheeded. Thou shalt not make a machine. The Bene Gesserit's design, the Fremen's faith, all gears in a mortal engine. A child's mind, honed by spice and silence, becomes the fulcrum of empires. What does a species fear more than its own creation? The cost isn't in the making. It's in the nailing. Leto Roman II Golden Path is a chain forged in the fire of survival. Each link, a century of fear. Each shackle, a son who becomes a tyrant. The Fremen prayed for a messiah. They got a god who made them kneel. What does a savior owe the species he saves? Leto answers with silence. His path demands 6,000 years of rule, not redemption, but balance. A ledger where hope is a currency traded for obedience. The spice, the desert, the dreams, it all bends to one truth. Humanity's future cannot be born in freedom. The Bene Gesserit bred knights, not saints. Their plan was never about choosing a winner. It was about pruning the chaos of choice. Paul's jihad was not a mistake. It was the first cut of the scythe. Leto's horror was not in killing, but in realizing the cost of not killing. Does tyranny justify survival? The Golden Path offers no answer, it offers a dare. Leto's legacy is a mirror, cracked, reflecting both the monster and the mirror. The Fremen called him Listen Al-Gaib. The absent prophet, what if the absence was the point? What if the Messiah's shadow was just another cage? The desert teaches one lesson: water is not a right. It is a calculation, so is salvation. Leto's path is not a triumph, it is a ledger. A cold calculus of what must be erased to let the rest live. The question is not whether he was right. The question is whether the cost of being right can ever be paid. And still, the universe kneels. Paul's path was never toward salvation. It was a spiral toward the hollow core of messianic hunger. The sandtrout burrow deep into Arrakis, their cycle unbroken, turning flesh to myth, myth to dust. So too does the spice bind its makers to a faith that consumes. Paul rides this cycle, but he does not command it. He becomes its prophet, then its prisoner. The Fremen rise not as nobles, but as kindling for a jihad that outlives its spark. Their hymns turn to dirges. Their war becomes a storm without end. What does the Bene Gesserit breed, if not a hero, a fulcrum, a lever to pry open the universe's rotten gears? Yet the machine they build crushes its architects. Paul's Fremen, his lovers, his children all burn in the arithmetic of power. The ecology of Arrakis is a mirror. Balance is not harmony. It is a ledger, debts paid in blood and water. The cold truth Dune carves into its dunes is this: power is not a mantle, it is a vortex. To kneel to a savior is to surrender your breath to a storm. Paul's final act is not victory, it is a requiem. He enshrines himself as a ghost, a legend that starves the living. His name becomes a curse, a parable for the fools who follow. Salvation does not come from messiahs, It comes from the quiet calculus of systems: water conserved, spice measured, power traced to its roots. Dune's desert does not forgive, it remembers. And in its silence, it refuses the lie of salvation. Paul's ascension births a holocaust. The Kwisatz Haderach becomes a tyrant whose visions drown continents in blood. How many Fremen perished for his prophecy? How many stars burned in his name? The sand trout, ancient as the dunes themselves, weave a cycle. Life emerges from death, power corrupts the hand that wields it, salvation devours its acolytes. Arrakis does not bless, it balances. The Bene Gesserit bred a pawn to unseat empires, yet their calculus failed. Paul's jihad was never conquest, it was a mirror. Every prayer for a messiah cracks the sky. Every plea for divine order births a new despot. The spice, that sacred mire, does not elevate, it erodes. It sharpens the blade that cuts its user. The Fremen, those children of erosion, kneel to a ghost. Their prophet walks alone, his voice a storm that drowns the songs of his people. What does the desert demand? A ledger, a reckoning. You cannot drink the well of power without swallowing its poison. The sand trout digest empires. They remember what humans forget. There is no chosen one, no holy drug to purify the soul, no noble savage waiting to rise. Only a cycle. A shiver in the dunes, a question buried beneath the ash of every altar. What remains when the last acolyte kneels? The wind, the silence, the unbroken ledger. And the cold, unblinking truth: power is not a gift, it is a debt. The spice-maker sand trout cycle is no myth, it is an equation, a closed loop where survival is not chosen but computed. Arrakis does not worship water, it demands balance. Every grain of spice, every buried skeleton, every whispered prayer to the old once-thighs is theology as arithmetic. Frank Herbert's grand design is not about Paul Atreides. It is about the math that swallows him. Paul is not a messiah, he is not a savior, he is a storm system. A convergence of variables the desert has long calculated. The Fremen kneel not to a god, but to the arithmetic of their own extinction. The Bene Gesserit breed not heroes but outcomes. Their litany is not hope, it is risk management. Spice is not a drug, it is the ledger. A record of how ecosystems weaponize faith, how survival curdles into dominion. What does it mean to be alive? To be a node in a network older than your name. Paul's vision is not a salvation. It is a harvest, not of redemption, but of inevitability. The sand trout digests civilizations. The makers grind prophecy into dust. The desert does not need saviors, it needs stewards who know the cost. The cold truth is this: systems outlive their icons. A god who walks on water becomes a liability. A people who trade resilience for messiahs become a footnote. Herbert's warning is etched in the Dune: survival is collective, not charismatic. Hope is not a man. It is the web that does not blink, the cycle that does not break. The spice does not crown kings, it audits them. The wind shifts, the silence deepens. Power is not a gift, it is a debt, and the desert always collects. The desert's debt is paid in bone. Leto Roman II famine time starves millions to bind sand and sky into a fragile math. Balance is carved from human ash. The Fremen's water is their blood. The Bene Gesserit's design is a labyrinth with no exit. Spice is the ledger of all lives traded. Paul's children scream in the dark while their father's name becomes a curse whispered in the dunes. A savior's shadow feeds the machine it claims to break. The God Emperor's crown is a cage of thorns. His rule is a ledger of lives cancelled to fund the species' survival. Do gods weep when they become arithmetic? The wind gnaws at monuments. The line between messiah and monster is a blade that carves both. Leto's face is a mask of every tyrant and every saint. The Fremen kneel not to a hero but to the arithmetic of their own extinction. The spice runs dry, the wells turn to dust. The final equation is etched in the sand. Survival demands a sacrifice wider than love. The screen darkens. A figure sits in the void, haloed by the sun's dying light. The text blooms, asterisk, I am the end of the line. I am the beginning of the line, asterisk, the voice fades. Silence hangs like a blade. The echo of that declaration lingers. A dynasty built on calculated generations unravels. The Bene Gesserit's near annihilation was no accident, it was arithmetic. Groomed a god to break a dynasty cycle, he became the calculated cycle. Their generation's chosen one, the Bene unload. The honored matters rose from the fallout, not as invaders but as inevitability. Every manipulation birthed a counterforce. Every spice-fueled ambition etched its own downfall. The desert does not forgive hubris, it buries it, then exhumes it as a mirror. What if the true heresy wasn't Paul's rise, but the sisters' belief they could control it? The next essay peels back the myth of salvation. The truth is